Okay, so let's start. Uh, so welcome everyone. Welcome back to another session of India ML Reading Group. And today we have with us Aseem Srivastava from IIIT Delhi. So Aseem is a fourth year PhD student who is working in the field of natural language processing and deep learning with a primary focus on enhancing conversational AI or dialogue AI in mental health support systems. Asim research revolves around dialogue understanding, generation, summarization, and user behavior modeling. His contributions have been recognized through several impactful publications, including paper accepted at venues such as WWW, KDD, ICWSM, and WSDM Wisdom. So today he'll be presenting the paper titled "Respond Act Guided Reinforced Dialogue Generation in for Mental Health Counseling," which got accepted last year. WWW. So Asim, you can start your presentation.
All right. Thank you, Kishle, for the brief intro, and thank you to the whole team for inviting me in this reading group. So half of the part has already been done. My introduction for the first slide. I was like trusting on like spending a few minutes to introduce myself. Okay, so diving to the paper part. Okay, this paper is all about dialogue generation. Dialogue generation is a hot topic these days because everyone has been using ChatGPT and all sorts of large language models for their use case in their daily life. In our use case, in this particular paper, we will look into how we can use this dialogue generation and how we can control this dialogue generation for a particular use case in mental health counseling. Now, when I say mental health counseling, half of the people, like half of the audience goes into what exactly mental health counseling is, and half of the audience generally knows what mental health counseling, but doesn't know the intricacies involved in there. So we'll look into this. We'll dive into the part what response act is, what dialogue generation technically is, and what part of dialogue generation we will be utilizing to generate effective responses in the counseling scenario. Okay, so I would like to thank my authors Ishan, Pandey, Dr. Shad, Akhtar from IIIT Delhi, and Dr. Tanmoy Chakraborty from IT Delhi, with whom I did this work. Let's dive into this. Before diving into the core technicalities of the paper and the method and the methodology behind this, how we did that, let's talk about first what's the current situation of mental health conditions in India as well as abroad. Okay, since this work has been particularly focusing not just for India but for any use case, this is more like a method. Let's just focus how frequent this is. So out of eight, 1 out of 8 people live with the mental health conditions. It is way too underrated. Almost 71% of the world is going into severe conditions and they don't even believe it and they don't even know about it. And this whole field is so much under resourced because only 2% of the worldwide budget goes into this particular domain of mental health care. If we talk about the region-wise analysis of what regions are specifically affected, you will see that a significant ratio of the European regions and the Americas, because they are considered to be more workaholics and more output driven, are facing the most of these issues. At the same time, Southeast Asia, which is where we also lie, is also not leading somewhere in the back. It holds a significant ratio of 13.2%. And yeah, there's a significant ratio of across all the regions you can see who is facing these mental health issues. How is this survey conducted? This survey was conducted by WHO and it was published in IMHU. But what they did was they looked into the records of national healthcare systems and recorded of people who are suffering through these issues. The numbers which are not being shown here are the people who are not even approaching the mental health health, mental healthcare systems. So these numbers may look like a good numbers, but they are still falling short with the reality when compared with the reality. Now, out of all these good analysis over here is if there is any particular issues with the males or females, or are they because a very common assumption over here is the factor of stigma. People say I have a mental health issue. Is it as direct as having I have fever? Because if you have fever, there's a good chance you will be visiting a doctor, because that's very easy to talk about. But if you are going through a PT, going through the symptoms of PTSD or having a depressive symptoms, a lot of factors come into play, because people do not usually go to counselors or psychologists, just because of the fact there's a couple of facts involved in here. The first one is the factor of the stigma. The Indian society and the societies outside also, not just India, but all the societies worldwide have one factor of the stigma. It's hard to talk about mental health issues with anyone. And the second one is the cost. People feel like spending on this on these counseling sessions is a waste of money, because a counseling is not something that you go once and the things get solved, the issues get solved. It is more like you will need more of 15 or 20 sessions in one run, once a week, and each session costs close to around a minimum of 5,000, 6,000 rupees to 50,000, 60,000 rupees Indian rupees. That's a good guess. So for them, it's a waste of money, and it's way too costly for them. So like a couple of factors involved. People wanted to understand: is it more like males spend more or females spend more, or males do have the more issues or females have more issues? But the studies show that almost most of the females as well as the males carry out the same number of issues, and more than 970 million people are living with these mental health disorders. So when did this particular field came into action? Because I can sense that, well, one can easily sense that whenever any pandemic pitches in, let's say world war, or let's say COVID, events like COVID-19, generally people tend to suffer more with with all of their tensions, with all of their some psychological states, and this is evident, because if you just see in this particular domain, in this particular slide, the New York, this is actually a headline from New York Times: during the COVID phase, nobody has openings, mental health providers struggle to meet demand. And if you see the average share of adults, let me just put a pointer. All right. Okay. Average share of adults reporting symptoms of anxiety disorder and disorder during January to June 2019 versus January 2021. So this comparison is technically comparing the pre-COVID phase to the exactly during the COVID phase, right? This is a significant jump. 11% to 41% is a significant jump in just in just a matter of year, because the COVID happened in between, and COVID significantly surged the number of deaf people with mental health issues, but it did not significantly increase the number of people who are experts in this, who are psychologists. The number of psychologists, the number of psychiatrists almost remained same. It was a great burden on mental health support providers, and the ratio of the support providers felt like that. This ratio of mental health support providers to mental health support seekers fell drastically. So after that phase, or very recently, people started talking about if there's a lot of stigma and cost associated to it, and there's a bad ratio of the number of mental health support providers, can we think of any other phase? So if you just see the headline in the back, India has 0.75 psychiatrists per 100,000 people. The ratio is very, very bad. One can easily digest that. Then people started talking about the alternatives. Can telepsychiatry bridge the gap between mental health experts and patients? That word telepsychiatry in itself was something new, was something, non-ordinary way of carrying out the counseling, because one can easily think of approaching a counselor and talk them about their problems, but then telepsychiatry came up. Okay, so what telepsychiatry is: talking to counselor over phone and having that conversation. These conversations, when done over phone, were found to be equally effective, not if not equally, but more than like, but very, very cost effective at least, right? So people started figuring out other ways of conversations when people interact with their experts and feel like having the same effect on their mental health issues. So this started the era of mental health support systems via virtual conversations, and then it significantly led to virtual mental health assistants, where the person who is talking on the other side may or may not be human. It can be a bot also. And if I talk about if these are evident in the market only, let's talk about let's see like these companies like Visa, Wobot, Inner are only a few examples of the companies who are into this space of bot-based therapy or virtual mental health assistants. They come by many different names. But if we just focus on this is since this is a very sensitive research area, generally the task of the assistants is to focus on generating helpful responses that makes the patient feel better. Okay. Now let's talk about if you're technically if we just like if you're particularly talking about dialogue systems for counseling. So these complex communications are patient-centered. This is very different from doctor-patient conversation, where you go to where you approach the doctor, you tell them your symptoms, doctor is easily able to understand you and just provide you a prescription. End of the topic. You take the medicines prescribed. There's a 90% chance, or there's a good chance those medicines will work out for you. But on this side of counseling, the patients who approach the counselor, they are so confused, they are so tensed out with their own situation. It is hard for them to express the real situation. And it's the job of the therapist to first dissect the whole conversation, understand it, take out the important parts, and then consume it and make the notes for them. And then generate an effective response as a human. So if we have to replicate this whole understanding to a virtual counselor, there's a lot of part needs to be understood, right? So that is why our whole research is driven by first understanding the right part and then generating a response that's controlled by those understanding. I'll repeat these. I'll repeat this particular sentence multiple times during my slides because of the fact this is the whole idea of like controlling the response generation mechanism using our understanding factors. Okay, so I just talked about the complex communication, and then therapist and patient both inherit some like particular characteristics. And most of the current virtual mental health assistants that we just saw, those companies as well as the projects, I have been a part of way too many virtual mental health assistants worldwide, and that's a very common observation because they don't want to take the risk of generating anything inappropriate. So most of these virtual mental health assistants are rule based rather than they do not allow their LLMs or their models to generate as freely as possible, just like ChatGPT does, which is quite understandable, but they are unable to control the LLMs to generate only the things required, and they mostly rely on rule-based generation systems. In in before we proceed, a lot of people will ask simply if like during this phase ChatGPT came into action, then came into picture. Is this a one-stop solution? Recently, we saw that if they are able to understand the emotions, they are able to show the empathy. Is that sufficient? But yeah, we also saw recently that ChatGPT gave me some advice on how to join a cartel and smuggle cocaine into Europe. People were able to crack it out. At the same time, there were some AI bots that were used as a therapist, and uh, there were some LLMs used in this AI bot. And this is the news after the ChatGPT came into play. So yeah, later out they were able to figure out that yeah, this AI bot is nothing but ChatGPT, and it was just prompted to behave as a therapist, and it led to a controversy, and eventually this startup got closed. So there are like not just these two, but there are like thousands of other news articles which talks about the controversial topics of using current age LLMs into this system of dialogue system for mental health counseling. There are a lot of controversies around it. So we don't need an all-in-one package like ChatGPT. We need more modular AI-based solutions. What do I mean by modular? I mean a module to understand so that we can rely on it. Yeah, we can calculate its accuracy. Yeah, it's able to understand a particular characteristic, and then using those characteristics that we have, that our understanding module has understood, to understand, like taking those characteristics, we pass it to the generative model and then evaluate it standalone, that yeah, it's able to control the generation using the understanding part and then generating the right amount, the right piece of data that I want. Before proceeding further, can you guys hear me, just to confirm?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
So yeah, just a minute. Let me ask if there any question you can ask, because you can ask now, or maybe you can continue, and if there any question at any point, you can stop him and you can ask.
Yeah, maybe like
Should be,
just feel free to interrupt me anytime. I would love to answer
yeah.
anything. Okay. Oh, great.
Okay, I think yeah, you can
Okay.
continue. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, we don't need an all-in-one package. We need modular AI-based solutions. We need models for each of these packages. And an essential component of the whole understanding model. I'm not saying the only thing because in our case, the only thing I've taken care of in the understanding module is dialogue act. What is dialogue act? I will talk about it. But what I have taken care of is dialogue act in the understanding directives. But there are a lot of other factors that can be taken into consideration, like emotion, like intents, like counseling components, like user behavior. There are many other things that can be considered. In this paper, I have taken care of one of the many uh, understanding component which can be used to control the dialogue generation. So that thing is dialogue act. An essential component of understanding directive of utterances is dialogue act. What is dialogue act? Let me just read it out. It deals with understanding the intended requirement of the utterances, which essentially act as one of the precursors for the response generation. I hope the definition is clear. It's more like it's very similar to what intent is, what's the intent of the interlocutor, but but in the way of more like high high level high level intent. I'll give you an example, but before moving ahead, okay, let me give you an example. So if I'm asking you something as a person, uh, can you please explain me something? This is more like an information request. In the response, you will deliver a response in the form, yeah, okay, Aseem, this is that, this is that. It's more like an information delivery. You will deliver the information I have asked for. So this information request and information delivery are the dialogue acts. Likewise, clarification request can be another dialogue act. Clarification delivery can be another dialogue act. Yes, no questions can be dialogue act. Yes, no answer can be dialogue acts. Okay. Now, if we understand if there is any, if we understand the essence of the current utterance or the current whatever I have just spoken is a form of information request, the response should be in the form of information delivery. That means if you know the current dialogue act, it's easy for you to frame an answer for the next dialogue act. Okay, so this essentially act as one of the precursors for the dialogue response generation. If you know the current dialogue act, it will be easy for you to generate the next dialogue. Okay, let's understand these pairs which I just talked about, right? Before moving ahead, let me just tell you that this is the data set that we have used. There's a lot of crunch in the data sets for the mental health counseling purposes, and only a limited number of these data sets are available out in the market for research. So this data set we have used is HOPE. HOPE is one of the data set that we ourselves curated in one of the paper that we uh, produced back in 2022 in Wisdom. So, but we have used this data set for our purpose in this paper. So the complete data set is annotated, is a counseling conversation data set where where there is an utterance back and forth conversation between patients and the therapist. And for each utterance is something that a speaker speaks in one go. Okay, so for each utterance, we have a manually annotated expert assisted dialogue act. The whole dialogue act hierarchy is divided into three major high level branches: speaker initiative, speaker and general, and speaker responsive. Okay, you'll see how pair forms up. Okay, if we talk about information request, that's speaker initiative, you will see the response should be in the form of information delivery. If we talk about clarification request, the response should be in the form of clarification delivery. If we talk about yes no question, the response can be in the form of positive answer or negative answer. If we talk about opinion request, the response can be in the form of opinion delivery. And then comes the general block. There are sentences like okay, yeah, those are more like general chat. And then the greeting that comes generally in the start of the conversation, like, hello, how are you today? Good morning, like this. And then the acknowledgement, like, yeah, I agree, more like this. Okay. Does that mean, is this a, like, if we just talk about the speaker initiative and the speaker responsive, does this mean that it can be a rule-based system? Let me tell you beforehand, responses to information requests in very rare cases can also be positive or negative answer. Responses to opinion requests can also be in the form of information delivery in some cases. Okay. Generally, like it happens. So it need not be a very strict rule-based system. It can, this problem is supposed to be solved using LLMs or large or like just language models so that we can have a control over their generation abilities and then infuse our understanding factor. So our initial task is to understand this chronology of dialogue act. So whenever we talk about dialogue act, there's greeting, then information request and information delivery like this. We first want to understand whatever the current dialogue act is. We want to predict the future dialogue act. This future dialogue act is generally called this. We have named it response acts. Why? It's the dialogue act corresponding to the response that we are going to generate. So technically, we're just calling it response act. From now on, I'll just call it response act only. So I just want you to be on the same page with me. And we will utilize an RL-based model. I'll describe the model. We'll just talk about an RL-based model that technically first tries to predict the response act, and then using the response act, it's a reward-based model that reinforces the model to abide to generate a response that abides by this predicted response act. Okay. So before moving ahead, because right after this slide, I guess we'll move into the, yeah, we will move into the technicalities of the model. If you have any questions, you can discuss it right now from the theoretical part.
Yeah, so if anyone have any questions, they can ask.
All right, like feel free to pitch
Yeah,
yourself in and like interrupt me. That's not an issue. Okay.
sure. Yeah.
So okay, so I hope that task is clear. The task is a simple response generation system. If you just look at it on a very high level, it's a simple response generation mechanism. Okay, not a dialogue system. Dialogue system is where you get to generate responses back to back. This is a simple response generation mechanism where you pass a context, a piece of the conversation, and our model will behave as a therapist response generation system. Okay, that's it. If we do it in a recurring manner, this will become a dialogue system. Okay. Okay, so for this paper in WWW 2023, we proposed this model called Reader. So technically, whatever we just discussed was already built and nothing new was proposed. The only thing that we discussed from this paper is the problem idea. Okay, so whatever we're discussing right now is the main contribution. So the proposed model that we are calling Reader stands for Response Act Guided Reinforced Dialogue Generation Model. This name came up from some abbreviation generator. Yeah, okay. So Reader is the model that we have proposed, and let us understand the complete flow of it. Before getting nausea out of this complete complex architecture and this diagram, let me dissect it for you. So just look into this big box. This is the input and the foundation model that we are passing our model, our input to. Just look into this as a, like an input model, okay, input box. Then we, this whole reader block, this whole reader architecture is divided into three different heads. These three heads are head one, head two, head three. Head one is rack head two is V head three is LM head. This is the whole rack head, okay. This is the whole LM head, and this is the V head, okay. This backpropagation is happening using the PPO algorithm that we'll like talk about it, and you can understand the flow once you have the. I just want you guys to open the paper in parallel if you want. Otherwise, let's just stick to it. We'll talk about each of these three boxes here one by one, and see if you can understand this. Okay. So I already told you that yeah, the reader is composed of three different heads: rack head, V head, and LM head. We'll see it one by one. So let's start with the rack head. Okay. Rack head, as you can see on the right side, is responsible for response at classification, and that is why the name rack. Okay. Response at classification head. What this particular model is doing, what this particular module is doing, this is one of the considers the SOTA model by one of our earlier papers, or a simple model like this can be used as a reference model here. What the why what is this reference model? We'll leave this question for a moment and let's just try to focus on this. Okay, so this is a simple model. Before doing this, our inputs are these: the speaker information, utterances, dialogue acts, goes into a foundation language model. It can be any model, but we chose it to be GPT-2 because it was decently big so that we can have a control over it with the limited amount of data set that we had. If it would have been, GPT 3.5, it was hard for us to control over it. Or if it would have been Llama 3, it would have been it would have been hard to control it. And our limited data set would only act as noise to these models. There is a study for it. We cannot control very, very large language models unless we have very, very large data sets and very effective perspective-based data set, preference-based data set, right? So we pass this input to the language model and then get these representations from the last layer. Okay. And then these representations are used. These are the representations. These representations are used by a very, very simple model like adding a GRU layer and a couple of layers in parallel and then using them as a cross attention module over here to get a multi-head attention. And the classifier is on the top to classify the logits. Okay. Now, just forget about the part of the reference model over here. So this whole block is composed of two different blocks. This is in parallel. This runs in parallel. Reference model and the rack head. Okay. This rack head's responses, these logits, are compared with the reference model's performance. What is this reference model? This is the first time I'm telling you. I should have told you this. I should have told you earlier. But this whole model is behaving as an RLAIF architecture, a reinforcement learning with AI feedback architecture. Okay, we want the preference. We want the performance of this model to be judged by an AI module. And what this AI module is? This AI module is nothing but this SOTA. Why? Like there exists a paper on the whole data set that is specialized for dialogue act classification. We use that same model, fine-tuned it for response set classification purposes, and then that model behaves as the SOTA in this particular domain. Now, this SOTA generates a logics in itself. We compare these logics. If they are very, very similar, the reward goes high. If they are not similar, reward is low, right? But this alone is not just the complete reward. Let's move ahead. I hope the high level summary of this rack head is to generate a reward parameter for us. And when will be the reward parameter high? When will the reward high? When we are generating response act accurately, and when it will be low, when the response act accuracy down stays down or uh, misaccurate, like misclassifies for the from the response act classifier. Okay. Let's move to the second head, LM head. Rack head is done.
Asim, I have a question here.
Yes.
Yeah, so the representations that you have used, those are all the dialogues that is done between experts and clients, all these tokens. What are these representations from GPT-2 you're getting?
Okay. So what we have passed in one go is a context window. Uh, for the representation purposes, we show that we have passed the conversation till now, but due to the limitation of these language models, we can only consider the fixed length till the last, right? So for the current utterance, we pass the current utterance plus the context window of size k. In our experiments, the size k is equal to 5. So technically, we are passing last 6 utterances altogether to the foundation language model. And the representation are the hidden representation from the last layer that we are utilizing everywhere.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thanks. All right. So yeah, let's talk about the LM head. Just like rack head was responsible for generating for classifying response sets, LM head, just like the standard language model head, is responsible for generating the tokens. Okay. So let's forget about the reference model once again for this particular block, and the job of the LM head is to use these representations and then put an LM head on top of it and simply generate the next utterance ut plus 1. For the current utterance ut, we are generating ut plus 1 like a very simple, straightforward GPT-2 model or any foundation language model with an LM head on top of it. But this this new utterance that we have generated is then compared with a reference model because this is an RLAIF paradigm. This reference model is nothing but GPT-2. This is our best performing baseline so far. When we will move to the result section, we will see it that GPT-2 is the best performing baseline for the given system that we have in hand. And the best baseline is considered, we have considered the best performing baseline to be the reference model for us. So the response generated by the GPT-2 model, the vanilla GPT-2 model without fine tuning, without fine tuned version, and the utterance generated from it, we will use it to compute the BERTScore over here. Okay, so there's one thing called BERTScore, and then our model has generated some sort of entropy also. We'll club these two. We will club this stuff into the V head. What V head is doing? V head is the value head. What value head is? Value head is nothing but it is accumulating all the reward parameters that we are getting from rack head as well as the LM head together to form a reward equation, a reward model. Okay, if you can zoom into this and look into this, this is lambda 1 times r, lambda 2 times ps plus lambda 3 times rho minus reward entropy. Okay, so all of this together forms why entropy is in minus because we want our entropy to be low to have a good reward. Okay, so yeah, ROUGE score, BERT score, entropy, all of these together forms a complete reward function. And then this complete reward that we are talking about, this lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3, lambda 4 are trainable hyperparameters. All of these together act as a reward for the backpropagation algorithm through PPO. Now, this system, like if you want to have a high level look of the complete system now, I hope you get the complete pipeline, how it is working. So yeah, this is how this is how a complete flow looks like. Okay, if you talk about the results, you'll see this paper is from um, WWW 2023, but the experiments submission was done somewhere around I guess December or November 2022, and it was submitted. There was barely any new models. We continuously keep getting the like questions like, have you tried ChatGPT on this? Have you tried Llama 3 on this? These models were not there at that time, and I am not even planning to use these models with these systems. There's something new we are coming up with for those models. But yeah, at that time, these models were not there. The models which were present there, like Dialog GPT, GPT-2, HRED with the speaker reference encoders, RAGRES, and all these, we tried all of them. The models were ever present at that time. But um, we also tried out very large language models, and there was like clear distinction of losing control over there. Whatever we were passing, prompting strategies were not there at that time. We didn't try that. That was something, if we would have done, ours would be the novelty of prompting strategies. But yeah, so these things like that we have tried over here is more like one step before the age of current large language models that we have seen. Okay, the models that we have compared, our models, the reader, and you'll see the performance across all the metrics that we have used: R1, R2, RL, BERT score, and as well as the METEOR score. There is a good jump in across all the metric scores. Instead, like just leaving RL for RL precision over here, which is 8% down. But yeah, a good part is we are beating 10 out of 11 metrics and a significant score increase of 22% in the R1 score, which is reasonable. Also, you can see that reader minus rag head, the contribution of the rag head plays a significant role. Why? Like if we are telling you that we are controlling the generation, we are controlling the LM head operation, it should be clear why the contribution of the rag head. So there is a reasonable jump from utilizing rackhead to not utilizing rackhead. Okay, so justifies the usage of rackhead also. Why response set classifier is needed to control the responses. Generalization. One of the reviewers commented on our paper that yeah, you used a Hope dataset. How about you used it on the other data sets? So for other data sets, since we are like controlling the dialogue generation mechanism through the usage of dialogue acts only, we needed another data set. Maybe not mental health, maybe not mental health, but at least a data set that has a dialogue acts annotated to it. So there's a standard dialogue act annotation, annotated conversational data set called switchboard dialogue act data set, right? I hope everybody has heard of it. Whoever works in the space of dialogue system must have heard of it, right? So we ran our model and we ran the best performing baseline as well as the most suitable baseline for this, like the dialogue GPT and GPT-2 for it. And as you can see, our model minutely beats uh, most of the baselines across all the paradigm, and there's a minute jump. There's a minute fall in the space of in, in this metric R1 recall. But yeah,
Yeah, Siddharth
moreover,
want to ask a question. Yeah, Siddharth want to ask a
yeah,
question. Yeah,
please.
Siddharth.
Uh, yeah, hi Aseem. So you
Hi,
said
Siddharth.
that so for the generalization experiment, you're comparing against the SWDA data set, and you're seeing that the jump is kind of marginal over the other benchmark models. So can that be attributed to the kind of categories in this other data set as opposed to the Hope data set in terms of the let's say the kind of queries, responses, and general conversation that can happen? Or like, I basically want to understand what could be the attributing factor for uh, the performance not being significantly better and just being marginally better.
I got your question. I got your question. That's a good question actually, and most of the reviewers and many notable person has like asked the same question to me. So considering that in mental health, what happens is that in mental health counseling data set that we have in the hand for the Hope data set, the
Hmm.
utterances are quite elaborative, and while annotating also, it's very easy for the person to understand. Yeah, the intentions are right. This information request only. That's crystal clear. But in switchboard, it's more like an SMS data set, and a lot of slangs over there are present. And if you just see the
Okay.
switchboard data set you will see that in some cases they have also annotated multiple dialogues because the things are not clear and the utterances are pretty short, as well as there is a lot of use of slangs also, and it generally happens because of this. It's confusing for the model also to understand the dialogue. All the dialogue that's present over there are not uh, crystal clear in the way of like they are not forming a pattern in that sense, or in all the cases it's very easy for the movie dialogues to take
Hmm.
conversation in any direction. So
Right.
this is more like a one-to-one conversation. It's easy for the model to get confused in the switchboard, but in one-to-one setting and in more like a very precise setting when we're talking about one single topic, Hope dataset is more structured, I would say.
Okay. Okay. And second question is there do you see a potential to expand the data set using modern LLMs, or because you said that existing data sets are not very large. So do you think that synthetically generated text can be used to expand your existing data set?
I wish I could have done that. Yeah, I think of it every possible day if I can just enhance my data set, but the sensitivity of this research area doesn't allow me to do so because
Okay.
there's a lot of privacy and a lot of sensitivity associated with the mental health counseling, and
Mm.
touching it like causes us a lot of like raises a lot of questions. Why have you touched it? Why have you changed this particular thing, this particular
Mm.
token? And isn't like is it like completely ethical? This ethical topic comes in a lot. So
Right.
it's hard to touch these data sets unless it's coming from a very validated and psychologically approved sources.
Right. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so I feel like I've covered all of the topics, and this is the end of the chat that we end of the paper discussion that we are having. You can scan the QR code to access paper code and my website. All over the stuff is present over there. My site must also be there. And yeah, feel free to ask me any questions if you have.
Okay, thank you, Aseem, for this wonderful talk. So now it's open to the audience. If you have any question, you can ask.
So I have one more question. So can you go back to the model architecture that you were showing?
Yes.
Yeah, so here you were talking about the reward mechanism, including a combination of multiple scores like ROUGE and other metrics. So are you giving them equal weightage, or like what are the hyperparameters that you're choosing for these different metrics that you have? So I see that you have ROUGE, BERTScore, and a couple of other scoring mechanisms,
Yeah.
with
So
each
yeah,
having a
lambda one,
lambda
lambda two,
parameter.
lambda three. Yeah,
Yeah,
so lambda is a trainable hyperparameter, and we did try out multiple variants of it. We did see that if we give, okay, I will share the findings out of it. These are not equally
mm,
weighted at all, and there's
okay,
a reason behind it. If you give high weight to ROUGE score, what happens is that the model will try to, start copying the tokens, and you may find instances where the responses that are being generated is more like you are my, just because they are getting a higher ROGE score over there. So just because token overlapping is one of the metric, this should not be like, we should not be weighing it much. So you'll
right,
find lambda one is being weighted as close to somewhere around less than 0.01. Okay. But the BERT score, the contextual similarity seems to be carrying a more potential over here. And that's why the reward parameter for the BERT score is pretty high. That's a trade-off. We
right,
observed it over multiple runs of the experiments, and that's only possible because we have used not so large language model
correct,
GPT-2. That is why
right,
it was possible.
right. Okay. Okay. So basically, you're saying that based on your findings, context matters more than token overlap. Can you say that conclusively?
While reinforcing, because RL is a very cumbersome thing to apply to any generation. A little
Right.
overload, a little more rewarding to the model starts like makes the model to start copying, and we should define the right reward parameters and the right penalizing parameters very accurately. It's essential for us to design, and it's not like it's predefined. It's a part of the experimentation only.
Right.
So yeah, in our case, it's the case.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and in the architecture diagram again, you had this. So maybe I missed it. On the top left, what are these expert client? So these are like the dialogues between the professional and the client.
Yeah. So expert is the
Uh,
therapist, client is the patient.
okay. Okay.
Speaker labels.
Got it.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Okay, since
Okay.
I
Even
think
like
there is
even in the future, if you have any questions, you can just ping me on email, or like you can contact me
yeah, yeah,
anytime.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and we okay. There is a question in Q&A. Just a minute.
Maybe I can
You
refer
just
it.
I'm not able. Yes,
So if you
Shruti
scroll
has a
down,
no, in the
Okay.
top.
Should they?
Shruti has,
yeah.
Okay. Let me just read it out. Okay. So Shruti, here I want to ask that your final reward value is a scalar value. Yes, it is a scalar value, Shruti. Thanks for your answer since you are
No,
using
this is an
approximation
old
and the
oh,
question.
this is a old question.
okay, okay, got it. Okay, yeah. So yes, this is it is a scalar value that we are getting out of the V head.
Okay, since
I'm
yeah,
stopping the screen sharing. Like you can let
yeah,
me know
yeah,
if you need
sure.
to share it
Okay,
again.
yeah. So I don't think any other question is there. Okay, just a minute. Once again, there is a so Shruti had asked one more question. So it's a scalar value, then from matrix, how you're converting it into a scalar. In the top, you'll find
I can't see this question. I just discussing. Let me find it.
top. So first one, if you just click on Q&A,
Yeah, if it is
from
a
the
scalar
top.
value, then from the matrix, how you are converting it into a scalar? Just a second, let me find it out. It's not a matrix. So if you're talking about the reward parameter we're getting from the rack head, It's the average of all the logic difference that we have seen. Okay. So there are like two matrices, there are two tensors of logics that we are getting. Let me go to the technicalities here. So the reward that we are getting over there is the difference between these two logics, and then the mean, and then the average value of it. Okay. So this average value is a scalar value. Likewise, the entropy is again a scalar value, and the BERTScore, as you already know, is a scalar value. The ROUGE scores, as you already know, is a scalar value, is all act as a metric. Okay. So if you're like particularly interested, then we took ROUGE F1, a ROUGE 1 F1 score. That's already a scalar value. So all of these we made it scalar, and then only we perform the just simple mathematics of like adding and subtracting over there for our use case. Does that explain? I hope it explains. So all the parameters, all the reward parameters are already in the scalar values only before like converting it into passing it into the VHEAD.
Okay, anyone have any further question? Okay, I don't think there's any further question. Okay, thanks Aseem again for this wonderful talk. So this video will be uploading in YouTube channel, and if you want to share the link of the PPT, you can just share with us. So we'll put it in the video description.
Sure, I'm happy to share it, and thank you very much,
Okay,
Kisla and Siddharth, for this opportunity. I feel really happy
okay,
to do this.
okay,
Same
okay.
here.
Thanks.
Thanks.
We'll meet again. Yeah, we'll meet
Yeah,
again.
sure, anytime.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye
Yeah.
bye. Bye.